Hey, it's Raj from 3CB Performance. Golden State Warriors guard and three-time NBA champion, two-time MVP, Steph Curry is arguably the greatest shooter of all time, with a dead-eye ability to shoot from obscene distances. In this video, I'll break down the key technique that unlocks Steph's incredible shooting range. On longer distance shots, many players will modify their form by going deeper into their quote dip, aka the loading phase of the jumper, to make up for the longer distance. However, Steph does something vastly different. ESPN Sports Science compared the physical differences between Steph shooting the three from within 30 feet versus shooting from 30 plus feet, and the only change was an increase in wrist flexion velocity, speed, aka wrist snap, most likely due to increased wrist flexor activation. This technique of altering wrist flexion velocity, wrist snap, rather than dip, is the underpinning of Steph's effectiveness on deep threes. Let me explain why. A jump shot is a sensitive series of sequential movements. Through countless hours of training, good shooters develop a rhythm that preempts the shot, known as quote motor or movement priming, and develop a specific timing and coordination to their shot, aka muscle memory, known in movement science as a quote motor or movement pattern that becomes seemingly second nature. Both rhythm and timing serve to quote grease the groove of the shot. However, going into a pronounced and deeper dip disrupts both the pre-established rhythm and timing significantly more than altering wrist snap, for two reasons. The dip is what I call a quote noisy variable, where slight alteration can lead to significant downstream timing and coordination effects, the butterfly effect, because it occurs at an early foundational point of the jumper sequence, which can lead to fluctuations as you go up the chain, and because the dip is a multi-variable movement that requires multiple joint and muscle changes, such as ankle dorsiflexion, calf eccentric loading, knee flexion, quad eccentric loading, glute loading, lumbar low back flexion, and coordination of all these movements. Changing the dip means you're changing all these variables at once. That's a lot of noise in the shooting system. On the other hand, Steph altering his wrist snap is a quiet variable with minimal downstream effects because it occurs at nearly the end of the shooting sequence and only involves the forearm flexors. Changing wrist snap doesn't introduce much noise into the shooting system. The other major issue with a large, noisy variable at the start of a movement sequence, like changing the dip, is that it tends to make shooters overtly think about the movement itself. For a shooter in the expert stage of motor movement learning, the research clearly shows that thinking about mechanics interferes with the well-established neuromuscular pathways and leads to changes in form and worse outcomes. That interference is further exacerbated by the changes in timing and coordination we touched on earlier. When an announcer explains a missed jumper by saying, "Oh, he or she had too much time to think about it," I scientifically translate that as he or she was likely thinking about the mechanics, which then disrupted the normal movement fluidity. Steph's technique of changing wrist velocity, however, is a much smaller variable that occurs at nearly the end of the jumper movement chain and therefore minimizes that tendency to overthink. He just gets into his shooting form and lets his muscle memory take over. All in all, the key to Steph's shooting accuracy from extended range is that he only changes one variable, wrist flexion velocity, and it takes place at the tail end of the shooting sequence. This allows him to maintain the same rhythm, timing, and shooting form regardless of where he is on the court. The result is the greatest deep range shooter we've ever seen. That's a wrap for this video. Thanks for watching. My goal is to provide you with in-depth, evidence-based, narrative-free analysis, and you can always find me on IG and Twitter at 3CB Performance. Please take care of yourselves and follow the appropriate precautions to limit your exposure to and spread of COVID-19. Make sure to sub to the channel and follow along on all social media for latest updates. 3CB out.